Okay, welcome back. We're up to Unit 6, questions 27 to 32 of Acer's Orange Book. So this passage refers to hereditary diseases and sort of the history and the perception of these diseases. So question 27, the writer suggests that certain chronic diseases were given the appearance of hereditary diseases. So if you read that specific quote and the sentences around it, you'll see that there were some diseases which were considered to be hereditary, even though they weren't actually. And the question is, why did they think that they were hereditary? And the answer, therefore, is clearly A, typically occurred in cohabiting groups. If you have a disease and it's not hereditary, but it's contagious and lots of people live together, then lots of people are going to get that disease, but that doesn't mean it's hereditary. It's just simply contagious. So hopefully that's pretty clear. I'll go through the others. B is wrong because we have no mention of other diseases or how quickly these diseases spread. C is the definition of a hereditary disease, and the question specifically says why were these considered hereditary even though they were not. So C is wrong because that is the definition of a hereditary disease. And then D is wrong because these diseases that they're talking about weren't actually associated with social deviance, neither of which tended to be associated with. So that's also wrong. So hopefully that was pretty clear. Question 28. So in this question, we have the word paucity, and I've seen this word paucity come up quite a few times. So if you don't know what paucity is, it means small or limited. So in this case, we're talking about paucity of data. So it just talks about, paucity of reliable pedigree data. We have small or limited reliable pedigree data. The best way to remember paucity I have found is think of porous, like think of a sponge that is porous, or a rock that is porous, and if you pour water through it, the water is going to come out of the holes, and so that means that it's not very good at holding water, and so porous data would have lots of gaps in it. So we have a paucity of data, which means that we have little pedigree data. However, despite the fact that we have little pedigree data, there were all these diseases that were still being considered hereditary, even though we don't have the pedigree data to back it up. And if you just think logically, like 18th, 19th century, we're not doing genetic testing. We don't even know what DNA is. How are people figuring out things are hereditary? Like family history, yes, that is, I know that sort of stuff existed, but we're not talking about genetic sequencing at this stage. However, we're still calling diseases hereditary. So in other words, hereditary diseases weren't backed up by real pedigree data because we don't have that data. It doesn't exist. So, which means that the answer is A, that the concept of hereditary diseases was not arrived at via genealogical evidence because we don't have that evidence. So hopefully that made sense. It should be pretty clear. 29. We're talking about the word constitution. Again, I have seen this word constitution pop up a lot in GAMSAT. So if you don't know what the term constitution means, then just think of it as the Australian Constitution. The Australian Constitution are a set of fundamental principles that make up Australia or a country. Now, we can debate about the principles themselves. I'm not going to get into that. It's just something that makes up a country in the case of an Australian Constitution. However, you can have an individual constitution, which just means the things that make up. I've seen, the word constitution used to be referred to quite a lot in like older literature, and I don't think we use that as as regularly these days, which is a bit of a shame because I kind of like that word in this context. But it just means made up, my constitution. I am made up of these things. They could be personality traits or values or skills, which is why the answer is B. You were made that way. That is your constitution. That is the way that you were made. This is the Australian Constitution. This is the way Australia was made up in 1,000 quotation marks. So that is the answer to B. Question 30, according to the writer. So now we're getting the writer's opinion. So I just want to pause here. In this first paragraph, we don't have the writer's opinion. The writer is just stepping us through, this is what has happened, this is the historical evidence for it. Or I'm just describing what's happened. The second paragraph is when we start to get the writer's opinion. I argue that Now the writer is directly putting their opinion forward. So make sure that when it asks for the writer's opinion, you're focusing on that second paragraph, because the first paragraph, the writer doesn't have an opinion there. Just a little thing to make sure you're aware of. So according to the writer, the concept of hereditary diseases was adopted by medical professionals. So let's review. There is no pedigree data. However, hereditary diseases still exist. The fact that they exist with no pedigree data means that they are not based on the data. They're not based on genealogical evidence. They're not valid, but they still exist. So why do hereditary diseases exist? Why do doctors continue to support and diagnose people with hereditary diseases even though they're not supported? The reason I do it is to rationalize and to some extent excuse its ability, which is D. So it's a matter of convenience. Doctors are still diagnosing people with these diseases even though the fundamental aspect of the diseases doesn't exist because we don't have the data, but they're still doing it because it's a matter of convenience. And we get that directly from rationalize and to some extent excuse. So it is convenient for doctors to diagnose diseases as hereditary. Question 31, very, very similar to question 30. You'll see how Acer likes to stack these. Which of the following prompted the idea of hereditary diseases? So we've just said that doctors supported hereditary diseases as a matter of convenience. And the reason it was convenient is to provide a compelling and explanation for incurable illnesses. So in other words, all these people came forward, they had illnesses that doctors couldn't explain or cure. And so instead of telling your patient, sorry, I don't know how to cure you, I don't know what this thing is, they just said, oh, it's a hereditary disease, there's nothing we can do about it. And that is why the answer is C, a desire to explain incurable diseases and an unwillingness to admit ignorance. And this is a face-saving explanation. They don't want to admit that they are ignorant and they don't know what they're doing. They're trying to save face. Question 32. Which of the following, according to the writer, was essential belief upon which the concept of hereditary diseases was based? So these are the two quotes that you need about the Constitution. So remember, Constitution is what makes somebody up, and it says that Constitution was most stable and least malleable qualities. So the Constitution is stable, it is not changing. And an individual's constitution also connoted heritability. So that is why the answer is A, constitutions are inherited. So just to summarize what's being said in this passage, the author puts forward the argument that doctors, okay, I'm going to say knew, but we don't actually know if they knew this. Doctors knew that hereditary diseases weren't a thing, or they were based on very, very bad pedigree data, but they still continue to diagnose people with such diseases because it's a lot easier to say, hey, this is in your genetics and your blood. They obviously didn't know what genes were, but this is in your blood. You were born with it. Nothing I can do to fix you. Sorry about that, rather than admit, I have no idea what I'm doing. So that's the whole argument the author is putting forward. Hopefully that came across and you got that in the passage. Okay, I will see you in the next video, Unit 7, questions 33 to 35. As always, like, comment, subscribe down below if something doesn't make sense, and I will try my best to help you.